I have a PhD in nature conservation in a combined effort between the University of Stellenbosch and Colorado State University. I'm also an associate professor at the University of Minnesota in the United States. I've spent my life busy with conservation, and Garth came along to me towards the end of last year via a friend and said, can I help him shed some light on what he wants to achieve for Marloth Park? So I've been giving him some help and giving him my opinions on things and helping him from the frying pan into the fire since then. I've decided to stay involved because Marloth Park has become the best soapy I've ever seen. It's fantastic. And I have to tell you, thank you for listening tonight, because I'm running out of people to listen to me. I have to tell you the story of a student I once had who was in the first lecture in a course, and I never ever saw him again. He wrote the exam and got 95%. And I called him in and I said to him, you've got to explain yourself. You were in one lecture and you got 95%. He said, well, if he'd left that one out, he would have got 100. So what I've decided to do is, in order to try and put things into context, in what can be called governance or best practice, what I've done is I've called it the ecological management of wildlife undertakings in general, of which I have been part of the construction and compilation of about 82 management plans to date. And we've called it the Marloth Park case study. And I'm going to go to different places and try and keep you people interested in what has become best management practice in a wildlife undertaking, and where I think you would do well to go towards. I have nothing to do with any of the arguments. That's Garth's problem, Cindy's problem, and whoever else wants to get involved. I've got nothing to do with it. I'm just here to give you a perspective on best practice and models for wildlife undertakings. I'm going to have to step over here all the time to press the button, but that's not a problem. Right. Let's have a look at Marloth Park. What are the facts? I've picked up a couple of others in the meantime. So this nasty story can get worse. It's an investment that everybody's made, and that investment is based on lifestyle. Agreed. It's natural resource based. The reason you're here is because of this resource around you and that view across the river, the Kruger National Park, and getting as close as we can to that great wilderness across the river. It's an undertaking. Whether we like it or not, it's a business. It's resource-based, but it is a business. It has an appreciation or a value addition attached to it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have invested your money here. One day when you're gone, most of you being retired, your kids will want to sell it for a bit of a profit. Or the day you've got to go to frail care, which I haven't seen one yet today, you're going to have to get enough to get the extra thick soft nappies. Am I right? Sure. Its governance doesn't exist. If we look at King 3, King 4 Commission reports on corporate governance, we look at internal audit, sustainability, world best practice, no sign of it. Its sustainability is in question. Everybody is blissfully unaware of sustainability. They carry on doing what they're doing and look the other way. Its sustainability is questionable. Is there accountability? Nobody's taking any account for what happens here. There are a lot of people doing lots of things, but there's no accountability. We can't haul one of you out here and say, this is your doing. Not there. And finally, we have to say that from this all arises a number of risks. Have I spoken about conservation yet? No. Right. What are the risks? The risks are there's no ecological management plan in place, which if you want to be a contractual park, if you want to legislate in any way protected in natural environment or protected private game reserve, private nature reserve, you would have to have that ecological management plan in place. There's a reason why it would have to be in place, but why isn't it in place anyway if it's an undertaking that's worth, at a conservative estimate, 3 billion rand? There's no suitably qualified manager. There are people that will stand around and tell me they're the manager, I'm the manager, I do this, I do that. Suitably qualified, suitably experienced, maybe, maybe not. I'm sorry if I'm hurting some people here. Third, fourth, and nth party external involvement. There are a number of people in the surrounds here, and the rumors are rife, that depending what you want, it can be had from Marloth Park. And there are a number of people involved in Marloth Park driving through the gates doing all sorts of things which are not in an investor's interest. There's no continuity of funding. There's bits and pieces here, there, and everywhere, but as far as management is concerned, there's no continuity of funding. There is some money here, there, and everywhere, and a lot seems to go towards a municipality, but there's no money immediately available for continuity of funding in terms of management particularly. There's most certainly over-exploitation. Over-exploitation by the wildlife at times and places, and over-exploitation of that wildlife by people, be it poaching, be it hunting, call it what you will, or even tourism that's been done on your dime. There are some illegal activities. There's a bushmeat trade that is rife in the Lowveld. And I'm sure if I go to a couple of bus stops and taxi stops not too far from here, I could place an order. The steak that I get might be covered in sand and grass, but I'd certainly get it. And the species may be dubious, but I'm sure I could make a plan. There are a number of people operating tourist activities here, which are not sanctioned by the powers that be. So the place is being used for ecotourism. The ecotourism, I can almost guarantee you, is the subject of another debate where a large amount of money is being deposited by foreign tourists in tax havens around the world, and you're providing the place to stay and the photographic opportunity across the river, and that money is not seeing South African shores. One of our biggest contentious issues in South Africa. We have increased environmental impact. The number of people here, the number of vehicles, the amount of construction, the strain on the sewage system and the water system and the sanitation and all the rest of it, and the garbage disposal and all of everything that goes with it. There's increased environmental impact, whether we like it or not. Garth, you hammer it to me there. Okay, the bones of contention we have is there's a political climate. We have a political climate in the country as a whole where people are watching. People are watching from outside the fences, and people are brewing up outside the fences. The political climate is not good for people who are not involved in an entire community. Internally, we have a different political climate. Everybody's got a different opinion, and like true South Africans, if there are two of us, we have three political parties. We have one together and we each have our own. And we're not telling one another. And if we have 167 of us in a party here, there's 166 informers. So we're true South Africans, all of us. My apologies to the foreigners here. Your biggest problem is you have about 1,400 amateur ecologists. Everybody has an opinion. Now, if you're a brain surgeon, you don't have to deal with this. My job is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. My profession doesn't exist anymore. Thanks to National Geographic, Animal Planet, and all the rest of it, Wikipedia, you all know much more than me, who spent 14 years at university to get where I am today. So amateurs, unfortunately, do have wonderful intentions, but they tend to get in the way, and they tend to siphon money off in directions where it shouldn't go. So unfortunately, that is a problem in any wildlife undertaking, and as with many things in life, it is said a partnership is a sinking ship. We've got a real problem here. Then we've got a bunch of flies floating around the dung pile. These we call consultants. And I have to tell you the story about the guy who was busy tending his sheep up a mountainside with his sheepdog. And a guy arrived in a fancy Land Rover with a satellite dish on it and a trailer and everything, unpacked all his stuff, and he put out his awning, and he put on a computer, and he fiddled with his computer, and he said to the herdsman, he said, if I tell you how many sheep you've got there, can I have one? The guy said, fine, go ahead. And he calculated, and the dish turned around, and the TV screens did their thing, and the aerials did their thing. Came back to the guy and said, you have 273 sheep. He said, you're right. He took one and he put it in his Land Rover. And the guy said to me, you must be a consultant. He said, how do you know that? He said, well, he told me something I already knew, and can I please have my bloody dog back? Okay. What constitutes ecological management? What is best practice? These people across the river at national parks have got about 15 scientists that spend their entire day feeding information into an ecological management plan. That management plan is on the website. That management plan is considered to be one of the best adaptive management plans in the entire world. Because besides their 15 scientists, they have input from approximately 200 academics worldwide into what happens in that park. It's considered to be a laboratory of the world. I consider myself very fortunate in having been involved in many of the things that happen across the river there. Okay, if we're going to manage, it implies decision making. Anyone who says they're a manager is the guy who makes the decisions. So I get it all day. People go, we need to go this. We'll take a vehicle. It's a decision. Take the vehicle, go. The manager takes decisions. To take a decision, you need decision support. In other words, the best kind of decision making you can have is where you actually have some information to use in your decision making. Your new car, what colors are available, how many kilometers per liter, does it have leather seats, etc., etc. That decision making based on this support that you have here, this decision support, the best kind of information you have is scientifically founded information. Yes, you can ask your nephew who's got a farm in the Free State. You can talk to your neighbor. You can ask whoever you like, but the best kind of information is scientifically founded information. So when they sent the space shuttle up, they didn't ask a farmer in Montana with the pliers whether this thing was going to work. They used the scientists to give them information to make those decisions. This decision support and the decision-making process normally goes into what we call a decision support system. This decision support system is what you would refer to as a management plan. In other words, where is it that we're going and what are we doing? God, thank you. Now, the problem is that the decision chain in ecological management in most undertakings is missing. What is this chain? It's missing from most provincial systems. It doesn't exist, but what is this chain? And we're talking about best practice. We have a record of decision. What is the decision that's taken? We're going to remove 50 kudu. That's a decision that you take. You then have monitoring taking place. And the monitoring feeds back to that record of decision to say, did we take the correct decision? In other words, why did we remove the kudu? Because there was over-browsing. What does our vegetation monitoring tell us? Does it confirm that the over-browsing is gone, or it's lessened, or whatever? This causal chain doesn't exist in most places. And what do we see at Marloth? We see monitoring taking place, question mark. People driving around counting animals. There was an aerial survey. All sorts of stuff done, but where's this stuff? What's it talking to? Which leads me to the conclusion it's a jolly. It's a waste of money. We might as well go to the bar and drink beer and decide how many animals we've got. Because that's how valuable it is. Sorry if I'm affronting anybody. Thanks, God. Let's look at wildlife management. God, I think I have to press that once more there for something to happen. Maybe a few more. There we go. There they come. Let's look at management. Philosophically, wildlife management functions from the left here at what we call benign neglect, through several philosophies, right over to active adaptive management. And if we're going to have a look here, we see benign neglect, do nothing. So in spite of the efforts that we have, we're pretty close to this. If we look next, we have what's called linear intervention. which is very smart words for crisis management. We need to do something, but we're not sure. Let's look for something to do. Then we have deferred action management, which is a favorite for government employees. We don't have enough information yet, so let's hold off a bit. In 40 years' time, we'll have all the information, then we'll make a decision. Passive adaptive management and active adaptive management, the difference between the two is that active adaptive management makes provision for experimentation in management. Kruger is a fantastic example of the last one. Active adaptive management means that they've had a burning program for the last 60 years, but they've moved systematically from burning blocks out every year at the start of the spring rains to a system now via experimentation where they seed the field with incendiary devices in a helix dropped from an aircraft. And these things spontaneously combust to give us burns at any time of the year, summer or winter, and that burn in different directions with different intensities, burning out different patches to create a patch mosaic which is ideal to provide habitats for the vast majority of the biodiversity to the last end. In other words, they've moved way beyond providing pasture for animals to eat. It's about biodiversity. That's what the whole issue is about. You'll see this little red line here. That is where most wildlife undertakings are, and unfortunately, it's where you are. Somewhere between benign neglect, linear intervention. Let's leave it alone, look the other way. We need to do something. Let's just do something, find something to do. We've got too many animals. The bush doesn't look lekker. The animals are thin, whatever. Let's do some crisis stuff. Okay, next, please. All right. This whole thing of ecological optimization and adaptive management has an origin with two famous scientists, if anybody wants to read about it, Carl Walters and Ray Hilborn, who developed a model not on an African savanna like Kruger. They developed it for the Pacific Northwest fishery. The Pacific Northwest stretches from California all the way to Alaska and the Aleutian chain. And that fishery has enormous economic impact. For anybody who's ever opened a can of tuna or likes your sushi or enjoys your salmon, that's where it comes from, most of it, the wild stuff. They developed the model of adaptive management for complete sustainability of the fishing of the resource. And if you go and have a look at that resource, I was in Alaska 4 years ago when the first school of king salmon arrived at Soldotna. And coming up the fjord was a school of salmon that was 8 miles wide and 25 miles long. I call that a successful fishery, including hundreds of thousands of tons of fish that are caught annually, to a point where if you're on your cruise ship or if you're in a fancy restaurant in Seattle, they can tell you the species of the salmon and the river that it came from. So if you're ever over there, I can attest to the fact that the red salmon from the Copper River are the best. That's the extent to which that fishery is managed. They go up the rivers, they go up fish ladders, they're automatically recorded by cameras going through the fish ladders, their size, their number, etc., because the entire whole Pacific Northwest's ecology, besides the economy and the social impact, is dependent on salmon. Because the eagles and the bears and everybody carry them away from the rivers, they die after spawning, and that entire energy is deposited in the temperate forest of the Pacific Northwest. Without it, the forest dies. It's that important. That's why this was developed. Just an example if anybody wants to go and read it. Right, thanks, go on. Okay, here's some definitions, you want to look at it. But active adaptive management incorporates research into conservation action. Specifically, it's the integration of design, management, and monitoring to systematically test assumptions in order to adapt and learn. We don't know everything about ecology. We never will. It's only by taking management actions that we will find out what our mistakes are. Kruger has worked out that culling animals is unnecessary. In the past, it's been linear intervention to remove wildebeest, etc., etc. But what we found is, in the wet cycle, the buffalo numbers go through the roof. They go from 14,000 to 26,000. In that same wet cycle, there's too much vegetation. The lions can be close to the zebra and the wildebeest. They drop from 25,000 to 12,000. In the dry season, the reverse. The buffalo really struggle. The lions switch to buffalo. Population drops to 14,000. And the zebra and the wildebeest, because they can see and there's no vegetation, the numbers go back up to 25,000. Impala remain constant because they're a buffer species. Everybody eats impala if you can. So they're always there and they always get eaten. So this we found out through experimentation and changing the count program and having better count programs. And in the years past, they counted the whole of Kruger with a 2-engine Patanavia. People will remember those days. 3.5 months in the air every day. You know what happened? All the experienced scientists ran for the hills in those 3.5 months. And the poor student who was stuck in Kruger doing something with, you know, glasses as thick as Coke bottles at the bottom, he found himself in the aircraft counting. We reduced it in the late 90s to a sample count, which now takes 10 days to count the whole of Kruger. Because we're now using mathematics, we're using better techniques and bigger computers, and we're able to do it. Do you think the old rangers who've been around for 35 years have accepted it? Not a chance. They want to fly and look. Well, then get in your bucky and go and have a look. Aircraft are expensive. Next. Okay, why do we do adaptive management? We do it because conservation or wildlife undertaking projects take place in complex systems. This little system you have here, all of its 1,500 hectares, is complex. I drove around today and I saw sandy soils on granites on the crests. I saw clay soils in the bottom lands at the bottom of the Katina along the drainage lines. I saw patches of gabbro with doleritic rock. And I said to the people in the car, wildebeest like gabbro. We drove on the corner, they were standing in the road. I was vindicated. What happens is it's a complex system, this relationship between the base geology, the soils, the plants, and what eats the plants. This system is 3.5 million years old. This piece of savanna has been unchanged. While the rest of the world was in ice ages, that northern Minnesota and Canada is 20,000 years old in terms of its vegetation. Since the last ice sheet receded, this is 3.5 million years old. It's been like this for that long. It's complex, extremely complex. We don't even begin to understand it. So, our world is constantly changing and unpredictably changing. Our competitors are changing and adapting. There are other wildlife undertakings where people may want to take their money and go and invest. There's plenty of them in the low field. Maybe there's better management there. We need immediate action. Is that the case here or not? Most certainly. Something needs to be done. We've been saying that about Marloth. I've heard the rumors all along. I'm in this business. People have been saying that about Marloth for at least 25 years. My here uitplek is 'n donder op, hoor. By the way, wie is Afrikaans hierso? Verstaan julle my Engels? Jy kan vra. Nie probleem nie. Ek praat Afrikaans vlot. My vrou is 'n boeremeisie, hoor. Okay. There is no such thing as complete information. You will never have all the information. Do what you like. You're not going to have it. And we can learn and improve. Now, that's something that we, particularly 50-plus-year-old dogmatic white men, do not subscribe to. We can learn and improve. I've learned that from my wife. My skoonpa said, he was a wonderful character. He said, we got together because we didn't understand one another. Ek het vir hom gesê, sit toe lees. Okay, what is the ideal? Is there some ideal? You speak to any ecologist or any consultant or anybody working, they will have a pretty good idea of what a management plan looks like. But what are the key components of this management plan? If we look at it and say, is there some kind of model for management plans, for ecological management plans? And yes, there is. God, thank you. Just we're going to sort of go through this. Right. What we have, first of all, and that is a decision that has to be taken. What is your horizon view? What do you want? In this case, at very least, the sustainability of this patch of vegetation. Because it's this patch of vegetation that everything hinges on. If you don't have the vegetation, your birds are gone, your impala are gone, everything is gone. And so is the value of your property. So you have to have some view that you're headed towards, which in this case, in most cases, is some kind of sustainability. What do we want? What sort of end goal do we want? We've got to measure that. How do we measure it? We set objectives and goals. Now, let me pull some academic stuff on you. What's the difference between an objective and a goal? An objective is not necessarily measurable, testable, or falsifiable. A goal, on the other hand, must be measurable, testable, and falsifiable. I'll give you an example. You may decide here, we want to propagate rare and threatened antelope. Is that measurable? No. But if I said under that the achievable goal was to maintain 12% growth in a sable population, that's measurable. You have to set what you want to do to this horizon view as a set of objectives under which is a set of measurable goals. Go on, thanks. Right, press it again. Now, if we take this horizon view and we put together our objectives and goals, how do we do this? You'll realize that this is fraught. Because now, if I have a single owner of a game ranch, I say, what do you want to do? He says, that's what I want to do. That's my horizon view. If I have 3 or 4 owners, then I go to them and say, boys, let's have a beer. Tell me what you want to do. My job is to articulate it into words. I've got 1,400 people here. There's been wars fought about less. So what happens then is you have to somehow have a workshop and come to an agreement. Whether you like it or not, not everybody's going to agree. In other words, there has to be some agreement, but not everybody's going to agree. You have to unbundle these objectives and goals, put them together. What is a priority? Right, let's have a look there again. Now what happens is, from these, for every goal is an action. If I have to maintain a sable population at 12%, the implication is somebody's got to go out after the calves are born and determine the increment, what we call the finite rate of increase in the business. Remember, I got 14 years over you amateurs. So what happens there is we can calculate that. But somebody is going to go out there with a pair of binoculars and a bucky and look at them and say, we've got so many cows, we've got so many calves, so many bulls, and do the population dynamics so that we know exactly what's going on. But there are implications for that. If I were to take those actions, each of them requires funding. I need to do an aerial game count. I'm going to need a helicopter. Somebody's going to book it. I've got to find the team. I've got to find out how much it's going to cost. I've got to review their operation certificate. I've got to look at the insurance. I've got to find out where's the closest fuel. It doesn't help the Okaraz or the Jet Ranger say, oh, the nearest Jet A1 is in Maputo. So these imply a number of actions, and it implies a budget. Okay, so we need to get a quote. You phone out, he says, oh, I'll charge you 12,000 rand an hour. Is it wet or dry? Do we provide the fuel? What is the ferry cost? Where's it coming from? We get a bill for 160,000. Oh, we have to bring the helicopter from Abu Dhabi. These are the jobs of a manager. That's what they do. That's what we train them to do. Thanks, God. That budget goes into a series of columns which becomes a medium-term expenditure framework, which Robin Gordon loves. But what it does is it allows everybody to see transparently what management costs are going to be. Because the Land Cruiser that the manager drives is not going to last forever. Neither is his fire cart or the pole with a bit of rubber on that they hit fires out with. It's going to wear out. So there are management costs. The unfortunate thing is, the smaller the area, the greater the management cost. The more the number of owners, the greater the management cost. Is there more people driving on the roads, etc., etc., etc. Thanks, God. Now what happens is, we still haven't talked about the ecology and the environment. You'll see these all feedback. I'll press the next one, please. Sorry. Okay, what happens now is, one of the things that flows out here is the expansion of baseline data. This place has existed for more than 40 years. There's no vegetation map. There was one done, but nobody could find it. Many years ago, by Ben Oban, as a consultancy in 2006 from the Center for Wildlife Management at the University of Pretoria. How good is it? We don't know. But this baseline data is important. Do we have a list of the invertebrates that occur here? Do we have a list of the birds that occur here? Do we have a list of the reptiles? Because that's biodiversity, which is much more important than feeding the bookies. Much more important. Because it's going to bring you international recognition and national recognition as a center of biodiversity conservation. Not just a place where people feed the kudu toast. Only then does research kick in. You obviously have research priorities, and university professors will do research anywhere, anytime, as long as somebody's paying for it. Then they'll disappear. But you have to tell them what to do, and that's a problem, because most people don't know what to tell the university professor needs to be done. And what's going to happen here is this research it has to be needs-driven. It has to arise out of this. We don't do research for the sake of doing research. It's expensive. Thanks, God. Then, most importantly, another one, very importantly, is none of this means anything if it doesn't feed back into your horizon view or your objectives or your goals. In other words, doing any monitoring is only to measure goal achievement, nothing else. And I'll give you an example. This might show you that there's a rare butterfly here. Occurs nowhere else. It's found on some plant here. This is the truth. It's happened in the 2 places I know. It's happened in the Volkberg and it happened at Suikerbosrand. There's one butterfly occurs here in a symbiotic relationship with an ant species and one plant species. The world's collectors of butterflies, so they'll give you $5,000 for each of these. The hell with the sable. We're butterfly farmers. In other words, what you find out here will influence what you do here. And as your information builds, so you change. We may start looking that way at the horizon, but we may end looking that way at the horizon 10 or 15 years down the road. Thanks, Garth. Next one. Right. Let's look at the relationships of goals and objectives to one another. They can be conflicting. We can't have lions and sable together. It's an expensive hobby. They can be benign. They can have an effect on them. Butterflies are doing their thing and then polar doing their thing and not worry about it. No problem. Or they can be complementary. I can run sable and sesame together, or sable and red hartebeest together. It's not going to make any difference. They're not going to eat one another. They're complementary. Or I may have species like zebra and sable. The zebra eating the stuff the sable won't eat and leaving it open for the sable to find stuff that they need, and everybody's happy. That's complementary. God, thank you. Now, the problem is setting these objectives and goals. You will have realized that's a major task, because everybody's got an egg to lay. And if I got 2 people together in a workshop, it's going to be hell. So you have to have a facilitator who knows what he's doing. So I can go around to the crowd and say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All the number 1s over there. I don't know, but I want to go there. That's facilitation. We use what's called the Delphi method. Anybody heard of it? I'm sure some of you in business will have heard of it. The Delphi method comes from the oracles of Delphi, where the Greek kings, Agamemnon and the boys, went along to the oracles and waited for 3 days down the stairs until the chick said you could approach. And then they told you your future, whether you should go over and kick Troy's ass or not, and whether you'd be successful or not. The problem was, as we discovered fairly recently, there's a dirty great crack in the earth there at Delphi, and there's some really noxious fumes coming out of the earth, and these chicks were as high as coots most of the time, so whatever they were seeing may not have been relevant to what the king wanted to hear. The Delphi method is exactly that. You break people into groups, let them discuss it, let them come back, summarize, knock off, prioritize, go back. You have to be careful though, because any kind of situation like that, you'll realize that 2 or 3 strong characters will take it whichever way they want to. Because unfortunately in life, they're quiet people, they're reserved people, they're intelligent people, and then there are other people who like to influence other people who will have their way, otherwise they're going to walk out. And I'm sure I include a number of you here tonight. I've been known to slip my mood as well and walk. So these are the problems that you have to deal with. Now, if we prioritize, we have to put in what's called permissible limits of change. Let's, for argument's sake, say, somewhere in our scheme of things, impala are a measurable goal. And somehow, by hook or by crook, we've taken some advice from some ecologists and we said you shouldn't have more than 350 impala. A permissible limit of change is, when are we going to act in management? When they're 349, when they're 351, everyone will agree with me that's ridiculous. So you're probably going to put in a permissible limit of change to say we will react when they get to 450, or we will react when they drop to 250. That we call a permissible limit of change. Kruger calls it a TPC, or a threshold of potential concern. In other words, we're not going to act in management until things reach a certain level. But what you will understand then is, I need monitoring which is good enough to be able to do that. In other words, the monitoring has to match what I've set as a goal. This monitoring of goal achievement is what it's all about. Thanks, God. Right. If you're going to have a look, there's other ways of doing this, of prioritizing stuff. And we go back to a publication by Peter Coombs and Mike Mentis in 1992. Hit the next one, please. And you will see here what we have here is what's called a statistical pairwise comparison. Remember the 14 years? This is what I paid for. Now, if you go and look along here, you will see that I have goals 1 to 10. And what I've done is I've got a bunch of panelists. This scores to 1,000. And what we've gone and done is we've given everybody a blank sheet with one side blanked off. And we've said to them, go and sit under a tree. Remember the business about the guys influencing other people. You give the quiet oak a piece of paper and I say, go and sit under the tree with your pencil. And you decide if the column is more important than the row, you score it 1. If the row is more important than the column, you score it 0. If you're undecided between goal 1 and 2, score it 0.5. Now you can't be influenced by anybody. Bring your piece of paper back, punch it into my computer, and I do a pairwise comparison and it comes up with a score for each of those goals. And you'll see here that goal 2 has come up with 150 out of 1,000, and some of the goals are much lower, down at 57 here. What is very interesting is this funny thing K here. It's called a Kendall's coefficient of concordance. It means how did you take decisions consistently in your decision making, and now you test it. What you'll find here is 2 panelists here only scored 30% on that. In other words, they were totally inconsequential in their decision making. But you'll find 1 panelist scored 100% in terms of their decision making. Now this is a wonderful tool. Because this sorts the men from the boys. Doesn't matter how bombastic you are, how big you are, not going to work. You can't fiddle the numbers here. Okay, next one, thanks. Right. Now, your action plans and their funding and budgeting and everything is very important, because this action plan is the year's work for your manager. And it's a double-edged sword, because whoever you appoint as this qualified wildlife manager that's going to run the place with his khaki uniform and his little green epaulets is responsible for doing these actions. But if you don't provide the funding, that's the other edge of the sword, then how can you achieve the objective? In other words, this is the hold on everybody. The fund providers and the person responsible for the work. And this will get you fired if you don't do what you're supposed to do. In other words, you now have a work plan, whoever it is who's the manager, which fits into the management plan and its re-evaluation. God, thank you. Next one. Right. Let's have a look at potential models that one can use. I don't think there's anything else coming up here. No. I go back one, thanks. Go back one, go. Page up. No, it's page up. 2 above that one. Right. What we've discovered in many years of working with wildlife undertakings is this is the biggest problem. Is you just have your management plan going nicely and everything working well, and you run out of money for whatever reason. Therefore, this is very important. The best model we found to work over many, many years, and mostly, funnily enough, in the corporate sector and with large mining companies, is create a trust fund. Everybody who impacts on this resource puts money in the trust fund. If you bring a tourist through the gate, trust fund. Your amount of money that you pay in a month, trust fund. And what happens is animals that are sold, trust fund. In other words, you've got to accumulate money in the trust fund. And I'll tell you why. You can't just have money for management, because one of your primary objectives must be land expansion. It must be. You're not sustainable, whether you like it or not. You're feeding thousands of bales of lucerne and all sorts of stuff. You're not sustainable. So to get sustainable, you need to purchase more land to make it a larger ecological unit. You already have line spread. You need to move the fence to the south so that these animals have got a bit of space to go into, that they're not standing on everybody's porch and under everybody's carport. So they need space to move. These funding models are very important for continuity. Who takes responsibility for that? A trust is a legal thing. There's a board of trustees who take total responsibility. Remember, we talked about accountability in the beginning. That board of trustees takes total responsibility for the achievement of the management objectives and goals. They may pass the task on to the manager, but they take responsibility for this whole thing, and they're accountable. They're accountable by law. Okay, God, thank you. Right. The way forward, what do you guys need to do? Somewhere in your history, as part of the SOPI, somebody gave certain tasks to the municipality, 2 of which are contentious. The one is wildlife management, the other one is security. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. I think everybody's in agreement with that. The other problem is that this issue of lion spray, I find out today, is not in the name of Marloth. It's in the name of the municipality. These are legal issues. I can't do anything about that. But you need to do some consolidation. You need to decide on the wildlife ownership. Animals have value. Their legs are not just there to keep their stomachs off the ground. They breed. They walk around and they breed. You have a return on these things, so you must have, my suggestion, a Section 21 company that the animals belong to, all the wildlife. You must have an ecological management plan. Whether you like it or not, it's best practice. It will open your doors to any legislation relating to declaring it a protected area, a private nature reserve, a contractual national park, etc., etc. You need a qualified manager. To manage 1,400 people, you need somebody with corleones this big. I've seen it at Kleseri, Timbavati, Welgevonden. We did a survey amongst the owners of Welgevonden. And in their questionnaire, they indicated on average that their ecological knowledge was 6 out of 10. And their management team's knowledge was 2 out of 10. Their CEO is Bradley Schroeder. He's got a master's degree in nature conservation. He's writing up his doctorate at Wageningen University in Holland. For God's sake, you think he knows 2 out of 10? And they rated themselves 6 out of 10. We're going to need a little bit of humble pie here. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. Your continuity of funding can be set up. I've talked about trust funds. You need to have some kind of strategic objective to expand the lands under management. That's a strategic objective over and above everything else. But to do that, you need a pot of money. 5 million is not going to do it. 10 is probably not going to do it. Around 15, we can start talking. Well, thank you. Right. I think I'm pretty much done. I think if there are any questions, I'll be around, or if anybody wants to ask them now. I get invited to places twice. The second time to apologize for the first time. So if you want to go for me and you want to nail me, be my guest, but there's a hell of a long line. Please go to the end of the queue. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening.